One, two, 1, 2, 3, 4.
Hey everybody, it's Sam Jacobs. Welcome to the Sales Hacker Podcast. Today on the show, we've got Peter Wooster. Peter is a longtime 25-year veteran of technology sales and executive management. He was an early employee at Salesforce. He joined in 1999 and really helped scale and build that organization. He was chief revenue officer for Marin Software, and now he's running his own consulting firm called Wooster Advisors. But he's really got a lot of deep experience building and scaling SaaS businesses, particularly in Silicon Valley. So I think it's a great conversation. Now, before we get there, we want to thank our sponsors. Our first sponsor is Chorus.ai. As companies adapt to this new normal, keeping your sales team moving together is more essential than ever. Chorus.ai is a conversation intelligence platform that provides key insights into the sales conversations that your team is having every day. Record, share, review, and coach your team based on the voice of your customer. With Chorus.ai, get your reps to hit quota consistently, ramp your new hires faster, and replicate your unicorns through coaching initiatives. All while together or fully remote. Go to chorus.ai/saleshacker to try it for yourself. Our second sponsor is Outreach, the #1 sales engagement platform. Outreach revolutionizes customer engagement by moving away from siloed conversations to a streamlined and customer-centric journey. Leveraging the next generation of artificial intelligence, the platform allows sales reps to deliver consistent, relevant, and responsible communication for each prospect every time, enabling personalization at scale that was previously unthinkable. Go to www.outreach.io for more information. And finally, we want to tell you about something that we're really excited about over at Sales Hacker. For a long time now, we've produced industry-leading sales content. We're really proud of that. But our mission is not just to do that, it's to help you do your job smarter. And even with all the greatest content in the world, there's a limit to how much progress you can make on your own. So for almost a year now, we've been working on something to fix that, to bring us all together. And after the start of the year we've had in 2020, don't we really need that? I think we do. We just turned saleshacker.com into a community so we can all learn and be better together. Rather than just reading or listening, you can now ask questions and get amazing, thoughtful answers from other B2B sales professionals who have been there before. Plus, you can share all of your great experience with others. The community on saleshacker.com is also the only place we host Ask Me Anythings with guests like Matt Dixon, author of The Challenger Sale. Go to saleshacker.com and create your member profile today. It's free, of course, and it's the best way to take part in great sales conversations just like the one we're about to have with Peter Wooster. So check it out. We're really excited about it. And now let's listen to my interview with Peter Wooster. Hey everybody, it's Sam Jacobs. Welcome to the Sales Hacker Podcast. Today we're excited to have on the show Peter Wooster. Peter is a 25-year technology sales and executive management veteran. He's currently running Wooster Advisors, which is essentially a fractional CRO service. It's designed to help early-stage companies to well-established technology companies with setting up and growing sales and customer success. Most recently, before that, he was chief revenue officer for Marin Software, where he grew revenue from 0 to 80 million and was part of the executive management team that completed a successful IPO. He also is a Salesforce vet. He joined Salesforce.com in 1999, and he was a founding member of the sales organization, 15th employee overall, which is, maybe we'll ask some questions about Mark Benioff. He's responsible, or at least Aaron Ross. We'll see if you knew Aaron Ross when you were there.
I did.
And he was responsible for strategic accounts. He built the first ever SaaS sales team and a member of the sales organization also during the IPO. So 2 IPO runs over the last 25 years. Peter, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. I'm pleasure to be here from my home office / the room in the house where my family lets me be. So,
where is your home office? Where are you right now?
I'm in the Bay Area. I'm in Marin County.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, I'm glad your family is leaving you alone, at least for like the next 35 to 40 minutes.
Yeah. There's a 40 to 42 minute moratorium. I'm coming in here. We'll see if it lasts.
Exactly. Well, everybody's welcome on the Sales Hacker Podcast.
That is the beauty about doing this now. Like no one can complain about background noise.
I think all of us are just way more human and authentic, and I think it's way more accepted to just be who you are as opposed to trying to wear corporate speak or corporate whatever, put on some persona. The first place we start typically is the baseball card, where essentially we give you the opportunity to tell us a little bit in your own words who you are, but more importantly, what your company does. So Wooster Advisors, I read the bio, but tell us about it. What does Wooster Advisors do?
Yeah. So great question. So I I had the great fortune at Marin Software to have a CEO, a guy named Chris Lean, a veteran of the tech world, who sat me down pretty early on and said, I'm going to be asking you to do a lot of stuff, right? You're VP of sales now, but if this turns out to be kind of what we're hoping, I'd like you to own all revenue. We're going to have a big international component of our business. You're going to own churn and retention for the first time. And he said, so as a CEO, I have advisors and board members and people that I talk to all the time that, aren't my boss. And he said, I encourage you to find somebody that, you connect with that could be a good sounding board for you. So, with that as my motivation, I partnered up with a guy named Mark Raby, who he's now the CEO of a company called Sojourn, but at the time he was a global head of sales at Yahoo. And, we'd meet quarterly, and it was great because he knew the digital landscape, coming out of Salesforce. I didn't know much about agencies and all of that. And I could meet with, Mark and just be totally transparent, like, Mark, I'm supposed to open up a Singapore office. How the hell do you do that? Right. Or tell me about agencies and how that all works. And it was this great experience that I had. His only motivation was to help me. So after, 8+ years at Marin and, we had gone from zero to an IPO and, for me, I'm a grower and a builder, right? Being a named public officer, and sitting in Sarbanes-Oxley compliance meetings, although I know it's important, I kind of was itching to be back more up in the startup mode. So I thought to myself, well, why don't I take the concept that I had with my advisor, but as opposed to doing it periodically, with somebody who had a full-time job, what if I 100% dedicated my time to it? So that was the genesis of what I decided to do. So 6 years later, I work with about a half a dozen companies at a time in the conversations, working with them weekly. So I'm getting to know their people, products, competition, personalities, challenges in a way that, we're not just talking about theory. We're getting very specific about what can do to help. And it's been incredibly enjoyable. In many ways, I took the most enjoyable part of my role as a leader and turned it into what I wake up and do every day, which is coach and help and try to maximize the success of the folks that I'm working with.
How early are the companies that you typically advise?
So it's a good question. I am not the guy that comes in when it's the product idea, right? When they're kind of thinking like, oh, what if we came up with this? The earliest I'll start is the product is in production. They're out there getting paying customers. And whether it's the CEO founder and co-founder that have done all the sales, or they've hired 1, 2, 3 salespeople, that's enough foundation for us to get going. So some of the companies I'm working with, it's, CEO that sold all the deals so far, and it's time to hire the first salesperson, all the way up to, I've worked with a few public companies where I knew the current sales leaders and we're doing a little bit more of a divide and conquer. But majority of them are in that, $5 to $20 million range, right? Trying to put that process in place really at scale for the first time. And then another thing is I'm not like a transactional sales leader. So think about a Yelp sales model. That's not my background. Mine is more enterprise SaaS. So, if I was to meet someone that said, oh, we do a highly transactional $50 a month product, there's other people that would do a better job with that.
Fair enough. Let's dive in. When you look at the companies that, there's probably a profile of mistakes mistakes. I don't know, errors, not through any kind of, incompetence, but probably just through lack of experience that companies tend to make at the stage that you're advising them. What are the most common, mistakes that companies make, the most common pitfalls that you coach them to avoid?
Yeah, it's a good question. And obviously the answer to this question is going to be my bias, right? So like anything,
We're
right?
assuming, don't worry, we assume everything is your bias. That's how it works.
Right. There's a couple things that I find. Number one is I understand and appreciate a CEO's desire to, as soon as they start to get traction, to go bring in a VP of sales, right? And I get that we would look at it and say, oh, I'm going to go find somebody who's seen the movie before and, that knows what it's like to, take something from 5 to 20 million and what have you. But the reality is, because I was the first person on the ground at Salesforce, I was the first person on the ground at Marin, I was the first person on the ground at another company called Angel Points. That first person in the building needs to be a seller, right? And if they happen to morph into who could be your VP of sales, that's great. But you really need somebody who can go out there without much infrastructure, without much, history, and just go sell. And so what I encourage people to do is, as opposed to bringing in a VP of sales, go get two sellers, right? Get two account executives that can sit, side by side or virtually side by side in today's world. So you really can start to pattern recognition, right? So did we win that deal just because John's really good, or is Julie also closing deals? And now we're starting to see some patterns, right? So, resist the temptation to go bring in that person. The other thing is, if somebody grew a company from 0 to 20 million in revenue, I know they might think in their mind they're ready to go back to, 1 million, in early days. But the reality is 6 months into it, that's a grind. And so, let's optimize for pattern recognition and sales volume now. And then, you can figure out that VP later, because you might end up realizing once your business is going, oh, we do a lot of install-based selling. So I don't want just a hunter-style VP of sales. I want more of a, somebody who can think about, new business and install-based selling or what have you.
That makes sense.
And then the other thing too, which again, I completely understand this, people want to get to a playbook as soon as possible. And the reality is, in that first, run up to $3, $4, $5 million, things are changing all the time. So as much as, look, I wish that I believed that it was a laminated playbook world because I'd build one and sell it. I believe that each situation is different, your people, your personalities, your competitors. And so you have to document a process, but you need to be nimble in seeing what changes and then how to adjust as you go. So, playbooks are great as long as we're flexible, right? In how we think about the actual application of them.
Absolutely. When do you think, one of the focus areas for your advisory business is building partnerships between sales, CS, finance, and product? And that always speaks to the word alignment. When do you think it's the right time to hire somebody in customer success? And then how do you build an effective partnership between, the departments that I mentioned?
Yeah, so it's interesting, when I took over customer success at Marin, my whole heritage was a new business sales leader or salesperson, right? So I had this perception that, oh my gosh, this is a whole new world that's going to seem completely foreign to me. And then what you realize is once you get into it, it's the same ability to do discovery and confirmation and agenda setting and crisp follow-up that works in sales is the same thing that works with a customer, right? Like, doing discovery on their challenges, trying to figure out their things. So if you can get your early stage sales leader to lean over in that part of the world a little bit while you're growing it, and you can do it that way, that's good. But as soon as you have big enough clients that a churned client would be close to the amount of MRR or ARR that the sales team would bring in a month, it's really time to start thinking about a CS leader, right? Because what I see with a lot of early stage companies is I'll talk to them and I'll ask what they're doing around CS. And they're saying, oh, well, so far we've had 100% retention. And our customers just kind of use the product and we don't even really talk to them that much. And so that's not a challenge. And then the next thing you know, they're like, okay, we churned out our biggest customer, and then they're scrambling, right? So, I think once the book becomes big enough that if your top, 15% of customers, if one of them churned, it would feel like a month of missed sales. By then you really need to have somebody.
I completely agree. I mean, sometimes I feel like the first hires you should make are customer success as soon as you have, just so that you can continue to develop this feedback loop of getting customer feedback and bringing it back to the product team and continuing to make the product better and better and better while your sales team is out there.
Well, and I'll mention this from my own past. And a lot of what I tell people is if you can make less mistakes than me, we're doing something right. At the early days of Marin Software, and I won't mention the very large shoe retailer that we lost. So I'll let you figure out who that is. But, we wore it as a badge of honor that we never talked to them. We were like, our product is so great that they don't even have any questions, right? How great is this? We must have built the most intuitive product. Well, little did we know the reason they weren't talking to us is because they were meeting with other vendors, right? So, you want to believe that. I mean, that comes from the Salesforce days. If we build the perfect product, right, then everyone can kind of do this on their own. Well, obviously, look what's happened to that business. It's a huge services side of their business as well now.
There's a bit of a debate on how to organize customer success, and whether customer success should own, first of all, should customer success have kind of incentive-based variable comp? Maybe that's less of a debate, but I'm not sure. And then should they own renewals? Should they own, kind of logo renewal? Should they own upsells? Should that be a separate account management team? In your perfect world, how is the existing customer conversation and revenue managed? Is it owned by the customer success team, by a different account management team, by the new business team? How do you think about that?
Yeah, so it's a great question. And as many answers are to these things, it is situational, right? But here's a belief that I have is that what is one of the biggest indicators that a customer is happy with the product and the service that they're receiving? It's their intention to buy more from you, right? Because when you ask a client, would you like to use this part of our product? You're not. That's when you get the true answer about how happy they are, right? Because they're like, are you really trying to sell me this new module? The one I'm already paying for doesn't even do what we need it to do. So for me, a huge indicator of customer health is their intention to spend more money and renew, right? So I've always had the belief that if your account management team owned incremental and renewal, it allowed them to put their efforts around, asking the hard questions to truly find out what was broken. But with that said, I always had a threshold or a situation that I brought sales back in. So if we had a big renewal, or if you have a big renewal and it's a competitive renewal, so on our side, it's our account manager and our CS person, and on the other side, it's their enterprise sales team, right? Because they're, if they're looking at a competitor, they're putting sales against it. That, as well as a threshold of a deal size, I say bring sales back in to help. And then you double comp, right? Because you don't want anybody to feel like that's a bad thing to do. You want your CS team to be like, oh, I should bring them back in, not, oh, I'm not going to bring them back in because I won't get paid my variable. So that was the one. I always had a moving target threshold. If the deal's greater than 10,000 MRR, bring sales back in. Or if it's a competitive renewal with an RFP, bring sales back in. But my general philosophy was, if you can have your AMs have a new business number and part of what they're doing is selling to the client, it also lines up with what the client wants. Because if you ask a client, they would prefer to have the same person that knows the history and the day-to-day detail to also be the person that is helping them with new products. Sometimes that insertion of the salesperson can feel quite awkward, certainly if they haven't talked to them in 90 days.
The counter argument would be that, this is a theory. I agree with you, just for the record, but the counter argument is the client wants somebody that isn't motivated by money advising them on a daily basis so they can trust the advice.
Yes, and totally agree. And that's why, like a lot of these things, your hiring and your screening of those people, right? You know what I mean? Is super important, right? And so, no, totally agree. That's why you got to kind of figure it out. And then the other thing is, if you have an incredibly technical product, right, and you're bringing back in the salesperson that isn't up to speed on like the ins and outs of every, challenge that they're having, it can seem disingenuous. So, you got to think about it from both ways.
Yeah, absolutely.
There's another reason to do it too, which really takes effect at scale, is I was getting 30% of my new business revenue from my account managers selling upsells and new products to my install base. I could get that revenue with no BDR or marketing cost. right? So that 30% was much more lower cost of sales. So my CFO allowed me to take that savings and plow it back into more BDR and more SDR function for my new business team because he was okay with the margin. So I could take that money that I was saving there, right, infuse it into more front end help for the sales team, which mean I could give them a higher new business target. So, the whole thing the margin profile looked good and I could do more to help my new business AE. So that's another advantage, but that happens more when you're up to 20, 30 sellers, not 4 or 5, right?
Yeah. I mean, yeah, to your point, you need to have a firm perspective on kind of your unit economics and that math so that you feel comfortable on the overall lifetime value, like that that 30% is predictable.
Yeah. And also too, you need a CFO who's a good partner that says okay, I get your point. The dollar that we get in new business from the install base costs us X. It costs new in over here. I save this much. I'll give you that much back to, put into investment. You need that partnership, right, with your CFO in those conversations.
Yeah, because it's truly it's an LTV perspective, not a payback perspective, because otherwise if they're not looking at it on a blended basis, they're just looking at higher acquisition cost.
Yeah. And then the other thing is if you can put a new business target as part of the package for an AM, it allowed me to hire more senior people because I could give them more upside, right? Because I could look at a more senior account manager and say, hey, you can make a little bit more money and but the other thing is, again, all this is depending, if your average deal size is $1,000 a month, not $15,000 a month, it's a math equation in the end, right?
Yeah, exactly.
As a lot of this stuff.
So, you're advising a handful of clients right now. I'm sure, we can't do any content in after, March, the middle of March, without talking about the coronavirus and sort of what's been going on. So how have your clients responded, and what advice are you giving them and how are you coaching, the sales teams and the sales organizations and the revenue organizations on how to adjust to this new world that we live in?
Yeah, no, I mean, obviously with what I do, I mean, it's a topic of every single call that I'm on, right? The world's changed. The model that we had is no longer the model. We're locking down, we're throwing deck chairs off the deck, you know what I mean? Right. So what I found though is, and I don't know if you feel this is true too, it's kind of settled down into a norm. Meaning it's not like we're going to do more work at home, right? You know what I mean? We can't work at home more than we are. We can't shelter. And, so people are sort of getting into the groove now. And what I'm finding is 3 weeks ago, for every, hour Zoom call I do with a company, the first 20 minutes would be about Corona. Now it's like a minute, right? Because people are like, okay, I'm okay. And the best thing I can do is wake up and do the best I can. So I think that's one thing that's happening. The other thing is, I think that what I'm really seeing is your BDRs or SDRs, or if your AEs are doing their own self-generated opportunities, you've got to put on hold any of those templated cadence emails that you used to send out on value proposition and general statements about your products and services. You got to put those on hold because no one's looking at those right now. No one's looking at, a general outreach. And so I'm encouraging heavily, and we're finding success, is if you can do research past the vertical level into what I'm calling the sub-vertical level, you're going to be able to find some good prospects, and you need to hit them with a targeted message that they can look at and say yes or no to now. So what do I mean by this? Well, you could say to yourself, man, the automotive vertical, completely hands off. Why would we call on automotive right now? And that could be a true statement. But if you go one level below that, digital retailing in automotive is actually doing quite well right now, right? So anybody that has any solution that's allowing dealership groups in automotive to sell digitally, that business is doing well right now, right? Think about, I have a company that does customization of products, right? So they allow brands to customize their products. They're seeing an uptick in business because people are thinking, how do I differentiate my products and not just discount them by 50%? So you have to go to the subcategory of vertical. So if we used to send out email templates to e-commerce as a vertical and we'd hit go on 1,000, you now need to go heavily research one category below e-commerce. Okay, I'm not going to send to commercial office furniture online sites. I'm going to send to home office electronics, right? Home gym, that kind of thing, because there are going to be prospects for you. And then the other thing is, a nod to what's going on in the world. I totally agree that's okay, but get to your point quickly of why you're reaching out to them at this particular time, right? I'm reaching out to you today because I did some research and here's what I'm thinking, and this is why I think we'd be valuable to you. Would you like to talk? But these are the best practices, you would do anyway. Yeah. It's just a reconfirmation of all the stuff that we learned along the way, right?
Yeah, it begs to the question of maybe it's just accelerating the demise of these, load up 1,000 emails and press go, because I'm sure you get them. I get them all day. And I can't imagine the situation in which they work. I'm not like scornful, I don't mind people trying to have a job and make money and do their job. It's just that when does it work? Who is the person that reads some completely templated thing and thinks, yeah, that's for me?
Yeah. And also, one of my companies that has about 15 BDRs, we did an analysis back to March 15th. And we looked at everybody who we talked to post the lockdown. And we did an analysis of why did they decide to get on the phone with us, right? Because anybody before that you had a meeting set for was a different world, right? But anybody after that, they got your message and they were like, oh. And what we found was by hitting industries, the subcategories, hey, I see you guys I looked at your site and I see that you guys do home office, and we're finding that other companies that we're helping them with XYZ, those are the ones where the meetings were occurring, right? And so that's what we all know we should do anyway. But what it means is your BDRs or your SDRs have to go from I'm going to hit 1,000 a day to I'm going to spend 2.5 hours researching, right? And I'm going to find, creative verticals that would still be open to conversations. So it's changing that job a little bit. And honestly, some of the BDRs and SDRs are actually invigorated by it, right? Because it's kind of making their job a little bit more strategic, if you will, right? Because if they could find a vertical that they could, and look, at the end of the day, like if they find like 30 companies and they get, 2 meetings and they get 1 opportunity, like that's huge, right? So those folks can impact the business in a different way than they had in the past.
How are you coaching your companies on adjusting their forecasting and their 2020 forecast? And I guess, again, same thing, right? Every conversation has to involve coronavirus at some point, and every conversation has to involve someone's personal take on how long when the recovery will start and how long it'll be and what the shape of it'll be. So what are you coaching your clients on?
Yeah, so it's a good question. I've been brought into it's funny that the refreshing thing about what's going on for me, there's always silver lining in everything, right? Is that a lot of times in the past, I was the resource for like the head of sales or, what have you. But now I'm being brought into more of like e-staff conversations, right? Because they're like, oh, you were around in 2008, you were around in 2002, you saw a major, it's the same principles, right? How do you lock down and get smart? So I'm finding I'm getting exposure to other people within the org, which is really great. The first thing I'm telling people is every single senior leader has to be present on all of the phone calls and the interactions where the topic of do you think you're going to do business with us and what are the challenges has to happen. Whatever methodology you had 2 months ago on how you did a forecast and how you thought like, okay, if my AE comes to me with these answers, that means we'll put it on the forecast. You got to throw that all away because on the customer side, their whole world's upside down. So I'm telling all my senior leaders, like, you have to be on those calls. There shouldn't be anything on your forecast that wasn't your ears hearing the situation, right? Because you can be flexible in what you're hearing. And then also you can really understand, okay, am I willing to put this on the forecast? So that's number one, right? Because again, your methodology is a little out the window right now. And then secondarily, try to take things off the table, right? If you can get something done quickly, because things are changing every day, again, in some ways you could say that's best practice no matter what, right? Depending on who you talk to. And then just be like double checking this all the time. Like, so I'm having CEOs send emails to early stage prospects to let them know that we're here for them and we're help. But I'm also trying to get it on the radar of that company that we're paying attention. So if this really is not a deal, they're going to have more likelihood to say, hey, I got to come back to you. Although we had a great call with your salesperson, to be honest with you, this is probably not something we can do today. I'm trying to suss out the real honest response by having these guys go a little higher. So, everything on that forecast needs to be, you're the one that heard it and participated. And then on the other side, which is the cost and budget, look, like do what you should do anyway, which is if, take your 20 to 25% bottom performers and, you should probably make that change, but you should do that. You should be doing that anyway. Right. And so again, a lot of this goes back to, this is just forcing us to do the stuff that we know we should do. So if you can do that and then you still end up with your team and you can kind of hold on that and come in within a certain, percentage of that original forecast, great. If not, you got to retool. But I couldn't imagine looking at any historicals to tell me what I should be doing with my forecast right now, though, right? Because this is this is a little, we've not seen this before. And then, things like the Payroll Protection Act. I mean, that certainly helps. And, a lot of my companies are fortunate enough to be able to get in the mix on that as well. So
that's good. We did a session on it today, and it was, as of the recording, a few of the folks hadn't even heard anything from because the PPP ran out of money so quickly. So
yeah. And you know what? No one asked me my opinion, but here would have been the caveat I would have added, that in order to get the money, you need to be 80% paid up on your AR, because I think that would be a good, prereq, right? In order to get the money, you need to be paying your invoices, because a lot of these small companies, right, if they're not getting paid, then they can't pay their invoices. Then they, you know what I mean? It just goes and goes and goes, right?
Yeah, it is a ripple effect.
Total ripple effect. So, but look, it is the time we're in.
It is. Peter, we're almost at the end of our time together, and what we like to do at the end of the show is just ask about your influences. And it could be anything. It could be a great book that you recommend. It could be a great founder that you loved working for. It could be a great investor that you think we should know about, a podcast that you want to listen to. But when you think about key influences on you, what comes to mind?
Yeah, no, it's a good question, and I might throw you for a loop on this one. But Teen Zwo, who, if you know Teen, he's the CEO and founder of Zora. When I joined Salesforce in '99, he ran product, and I was the first salesperson. So like that's how I learned the product, right? Was from him, because we didn't have any other way, right? And he told me, I sold a deal in the early days without showing the product and doing a demo. And Teen said that was the biggest compliment he could receive as the product guy, because he built a product that was intuitive enough and simple enough that it could be explained. Right. And I was like, you know what? He's right. Like, you know what I mean? Like if you can, so the foundation of the way he thought about product and how Salesforce thought about product, people ask me, by the way, what was the biggest difference between Salesforce and all other startups? And I would say, well, having $50 million in the bank without having a customer, right? And having Larry Ellison and Mark Benioff and Halsey Minor on your board, that certainly helps. But the foundational thing that really was different about Salesforce is our product team. They literally owned the outcome of their product features or their modules. They literally were incented to have us be selling that. The product team was always wanting to jump on the calls with us. they were measured on adoption of features. They would have to do a use case of what would be the total addressable market of what they did. And, they were so good at interacting with the customers and getting out there and helping us sell and learn and see stuff. It really changed my perspective on product. And that was a huge influence for me in the early days because it created that partnership between the two organizations that I hopefully brought into other organizations that I was a part of.
One last question before we go, because you piqued my interest. I guess, I read Behind the Cloud, and I know that like Benioff had this idea of these tabs, opportunities, contacts, et cetera, like, this vision in his head when he was in Hawaii. But the 50 million was like split three ways? Like, I didn't realize he was that wealthy when he started Salesforce.
No, yeah. So when we started, he had done a really good job of getting funding, right? So day one, I remember Mark Benioff saying to probably Dave Molinoff or Parker Harris or one of those guys at the time, build our infrastructure like we're $1 billion company, because we're going to be. Right. So you know how companies are like, oh, well, we'll scrap together this and we'll piece together. Like we were like Cisco and Sun and like from day one. Right. So Mark did a great job. And by the way, that was 1999. It wasn't a founder profile back then was quite different. Right. They were usually people that had, years of track record rather than, a lot of more of the younger founders now. But yeah, he did a great job of surrounding ourselves with a pretty impressive board, and he was at it ready to go day one. So
that's fantastic.
Yeah, it was fun.
Peter, if folks are listening and they want to hire Wooster Advisors, they want to reach out. What's your preferred method of contact? How do you want people to reach out to you?
Yeah, no, thank you for asking. I keep a very up-to-date LinkedIn profile because that for me is my way out to the world. So anybody can always message me through LinkedIn, or Peter at WoosterAdvisors.com is a great way to get a hold of me. Either way. And as I always tell people, if you just want to have a conversation about sales comp or pick my brain, I'm more than happy to get it going and chat that way. And if it's a fit, great. If it's not, you might know somebody that is a fit for. So I always tell people, never worry about just picking my brain on a conversation. If I can be helpful, I'm more than happy to do it.
Awesome.
But yeah, email and LinkedIn is the best way.
Perfect. Peter, thanks so much for being on the Sales Hacker podcast, and we'll talk to you soon.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thanks for having me. This is a great little distraction from wondering what the kids are going to make for lunch today. So I appreciate that.
Forks in the microwave. That's what they're making.
That's right. Macaroni and cheese in the box.
Yeah, exactly. All right. I'll talk to you soon.
1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4.
Hey everybody, it's Sam Jacobs. Welcome to Sam's Corner. Really enjoyed that conversation with Peter Wooster. And, I particularly enjoyed the conversation that we just had about kind of prospecting and research in the new world. And really, this idea that being great at sales in 2020 is really not that different from being great at sales 20 years ago. It requires a level of research. It requires a level of personalization and thoughtfulness. And it requires you to use your brain, which makes the job better in many ways. Because, as much as we love technology, there is an obvious human tendency once you plug in all the technology to sort of set it and forget it and to sit back and wait for the responses to come in. And as we can all tell, and as you might be sending or I might be receiving or you might be receiving, but if you go on LinkedIn and you check your inbox, there are just so many people that are sending such canned messages that there's such an opportunity. All you got to do is a little bit more work, just a little bit more work and a little bit more thoughtfulness. And frankly, I'm sure that if you're working from home and your activity metrics are being monitored by your boss, maybe there's not as much room or freedom to maneuver. But generally, just so you know, you can probably send fewer messages if you just personalize them and focus on them. And John Barrows has his whole methodology of tier A, B, and C. And, the tier A is like the 5 accounts that you are definitely focused on getting into that month. And those are hyper personalized. And then tier B is a little bit less personalized, and tier C is the set it and forget it. But All you got to do is just a little bit more work to personalize it, not just about, what school the person went to or whatever, but about something specifically related to your projection about them as an individual based on their career, based on the challenges they're probably facing. And it doesn't have to be a super long email either. So be thinking about that. Be thinking about the core skills of sales are really about helping people solve problems. But the core skills about getting a meeting and getting somebody's attention are making it about them, not you, and tailoring it and personalizing it to a thoughtful projection of what you assume or imagine their experience to be. And you can do that by asking questions and also by making statements based on your knowledge of the industry, based on the research that you've done, and based on your research about them as human beings and as individuals. So good conversation. Now, if you want to hear from our sponsors, we've got two of them. We want to thank them before we go. The first, of course, is Chorus.ai. Chorus.ai, the leading conversation intelligence platform providing key insights into the sales conversations your team is having every day. With Chorus.ai, get your reps to hit quota consistently, ramp your new hires faster, and replicate your unicorns through coaching initiatives. Go to Chorus.ai/saleshacker to try it for yourself. Our second sponsor is, of course, Outreach, the leading sales engagement platform. Outreach revolutionizes the next generation of artificial intelligence, allowing sales reps to deliver consistent, relevant, and responsible communication for each prospect every time, enabling personalization at scale that was previously unthinkable. Check them out at outreach.io. And most importantly, go to saleshacker.com to create your member profile so you can join in this amazing new community that Sales Hacker has built. It's going to be incredibly exciting. If you want to reach out to me, you can. LinkedIn.com/in/Sam F. Jacobs. Of course, we will talk to you next time, and thank you again for listening.